Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to provide you with an update as to what's happening with the war in Iran, because the economic impact is now starting to become extremely serious for the global economy. This conflict is no longer just a regional affair. This is now becoming a full-blown global economic crisis. Oil prices are now rising rapidly. Brent crude at the time of making this video is above $114 per barrel. That's one of the highest levels that we've seen since the war in Ukraine started. This time last week, oil was sitting at around $99. In the middle of April, it was around $90. And at the start of 2026, it was around $60. So oil prices have almost doubled in just a few months. And the key point here is that this is not a short-term spike. What we're now seeing is an impasse in the war, with no clear resolution and prices continuing to trend upwards. And that is the worst case scenario for the global economy, because oil doesn't just affect gasoline, diesel and petrol prices. It affects transport, it affects shipping, it affects aviation, it affects food production, it affects inflation, it affects interest rates, and ultimately it affects economic growth. And if these prices stay elevated or continue rising, which is totally feasible, this will very quickly start to hurt the global economy in a really significant way. This war has now been going on for around 60 days, started on the 28th of February, and we are now at the end of April, which means it's entering its third month. And the longer it goes on, the greater the economic damage becomes. But before we get into the detail on all of this, could I ask anybody that hasn't subscribed yet to please hit that red subscribe button? It really helps me with the algorithm and also means that you won't miss any future updates and puts a smile on my face. So what is happening right now? Well, the first major issue is oil. The United States is showing no sign of letting up on the naval blockade of Iranian ports, so the USA is stopping Iranian oil from being exported. And the purpose of that is to squeeze Iran economically. If it restricts its oil exports, it forces Tehran back to the negotiating table. That's the logic. But unfortunately, Iran is not backing down. In fact, reports are now suggesting that Iran's Revolutionary Guards have taken much greater control during the war, with power shifting away from the traditional clerical leadership and towards the military and security establishment. And that matters because if the hardliners are now more powerful, then compromise becomes much more difficult. And that means this conflict could last for a lot longer. The second issue here is that the oil market is becoming more unstable at exactly the wrong moment. The United Arab Emirates has now announced that it's leaving OPEC, and that is a major development. OPEC exists to coordinate oil supply amongst all of the oil-producing nations and try to stabilise the market. It doesn't always work perfectly, but it has historically been one of the most important factors in global oil prices. So if one of the major producers is now walking away from that collaboration, it raises serious questions about whether OPEC can still control the market in the way it used to. Now, in the short term, this doesn't necessarily mean oil prices will immediately fall or rise. The current problem is not simply OPEC's policies. The current problem is war, blockades, disrupted shipping and uncertainty. But in the longer term, if OPEC starts to fragment, then the oil market could become much more difficult to manage. And that's one of the dangers here. We have a supply shock from the war, a political shock from Iran, a strategic shock from the US blockade, and now an institutional shock from the UAE leaving OPEC. All of these things are happening at the same time, and the damage is already spreading. Crop prices have now hit their highest level since 2023. That's the last 3 years. And that's partly because of bad weather, but it's also because the war is pushing up energy and fertilizer costs. We've talked about fertilizer in previous videos. Food prices are now being pushed up by higher energy costs. If oil rises, diesel rises. If gas rises, fertilizer rises. If shipping routes are disrupted, transport costs rise. So this war is now feeding directly into food inflation, and that's a problem because food inflation is one of the most dangerous types because everybody feels it, especially the poorer members of society because they spend a disproportionately higher percentage of their income on food. If we now talk about aviation, the outlook is looking extremely bad. The war is disrupting flight schedules and restricting access to key airspace. Airlines are also facing higher fuel costs, longer routes, more delays, and potentially lower demand if ticket prices rise. And that feeds directly into the wider economy, because if people don't travel for tourism, then the tourists don't arrive, they don't spend money, all of the people who rely on tourism don't get the income. If we now move on to Europe, Ursula von der Leyen has warned that the impact of the Iran war could damage Europe for years ahead. Europe is a major energy importer. Higher oil prices therefore mean higher costs across the board. And if inflation stays higher for longer, central banks will be forced to keep interest rates higher for longer, and that's bad news for households, businesses, and economic growth. In the UK, we're already seeing signs of stress. Distressed companies are piling up as the war enters its third month. Businesses are being hit by rising costs, weaker demand, and increased uncertainty. This is how a global shock feeds into the real economy. At first, it looks like something happening miles away that's not going to impact on you. Then oil prices rise, then fuel prices rise, then food prices rise, then transport costs rise, then businesses start to lose profit margins, then consumers spend less, then companies start cutting costs, then investment slows, then unemployment risk rises, and that's how you move from a geopolitical crisis into an economic slowdown and potentially into a recession. Now, to be balanced here, this does not automatically mean that there's going to be a global recession. Some countries will benefit from higher oil prices. Major exporters will receive more revenue. Some energy companies will make larger profits. And if the war ends quickly, some of this pressure could ease. But right now, the trend is clearly negative. Oil prices are rising, the blockade is continuing, Iran is hardening, OPEC is weakening, food prices are increasing, and confidence is deteriorating. And this is why the situation is so serious. Oil importing countries are the most exposed right now. For those countries, higher oil prices act like a tax on the entire economy. Money that would have been spent domestically is instead spent importing energy. That weakens growth, increases inflation, and puts pressure on currencies. And for poorer countries, where food and fuel make up a large share of spending, the impact is even more immediate. This is why the risk of recession is now rising. Maybe not in every single country, maybe not all at once, but certainly in lots of countries. And if oil continues to climb from here, that risk starts to become much more significant. The key issue right now is not just how high oil prices go, it's how long they stay elevated. Because the longer this situation continues, the more damage it will do. So the situation today is simple. This is bad. In fact, this is very bad. The war in Iran is now creating a chain reaction through the whole global economy, and we're only just starting to see the effects. But as always, I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments as and when they occur. Hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, or maybe didn't quite like it, but you thought it was interesting, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I'm currently running my competition where you can win my property or a cash alternative prize. There's a limited amount of time left on this now, so if you'd like to get involved and help fund the channel, scan the QR code on the screen now or click the link in the description below. I've got some really interesting deals on the go right now. I'd like to also thank everyone that's supported me in other ways. If you bought me a coffee or sent me YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you for that support, really does help to keep me motivated. I also want to mention Joe and Naz, our channel is now live. We've got lots of really fun videos on there. We're bringing food, fun and banter to the internet. It will definitely put a smile on your face. Our latest video, we've been to the best afternoon tea in the whole of Ireland. The Shelburne Hotel is probably the most famous in Ireland. We went there, we had a great time. It's a really fun video. Please check it out. We need your support. We need some more subscribers. We need some more watch time. There's a link at the end of today's video. It'll take you straight through into that video. Please watch it and please watch some of the other ones. I think it will put a smile on your face. And here is something else that will also do that.